Taiwan's constitutional court makes a landmark ruling on the death penalty. On National Disaster Prevention Day, Taiwan tests its response to crises. TaiwanPlus remembers one of the deadliest earthquakes to hit the country 25 years after it struck. Plus, Taiwan pushes out a new visa to attract foreign workers as it seeks to ease a worsening labor shortage. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Liao. The Constitutional Court has ruled that Taiwan's use of the death penalty is partly unconstitutional. Its long-awaited ruling was in response to a case brought by Taiwan's 37 death row inmates. Louise Watt was in court when the justices began delivering their verdict. Louise, what does it say?
Well, Leslie, much hope was pinned on this judgment by activists supporting the 37 death row inmates in their petitions to the court. No political party in Taiwan has moved to abolish the death penalty. That's because survey after survey shows strong public support for keeping the punishment. So activists saw this as the biggest chance in a generation. But the 12 justices, the 8 men, the 4 women, they did say that while the right to life is protected by Taiwan's constitution, that protection is not absolute. They said that the state may punish murder to protect people's lives for the purposes of a just retribution and to maintain social order. So they ruled that it's constitutional, but its use should be strictly limited. They say it can only be used in the most serious of crimes, which is essentially what already happens in Taiwan, even though there's dozens of crimes on the books that still carry capital punishment. In practice, it's only handed out for a handful of murder convictions. And in recent years, fewer people have been sentenced to death and fewer executions have been carried out. The last one was carried out in 2020.
Louise, what next for the inmates and for the decades-long campaign for abolishment of capital punishment here in Taiwan?
Well, none were actually in court to hear this very long judgment being read out. There were a lot of empty rows. By my reckoning, 5 of the 37 death row inmates can now file extraordinary appeals. That's because that the justices, they overturned the mandatory death penalty on kidnapping that led to murder. That involves 2 of the inmates who were sentenced more than 20 years ago before Taiwan removed the mandatory death penalty. And then also the justices ruled today that offenders with mental impairments should not be executed. That could involve another 3 of the petitioners, the 3 on death row as well. But the rest have now exhausted their appeals. Some of them have been on death row for more than 30 years. And activists previously said that they thought that the court wouldn't hear a case like this for another 20 to 30 years. So what's left for activists? They've expressed their palpable disappointment today after the ruling. They may well now try to push again legislators, try to get legislators to reform capital punishment. Their pressure in the past and international pressure on Taiwanese legislators hasn't changed much, though, because of that strong public support for the death penalty in Taiwan.
All right, thank you, Louise. That was Louise Watt live for us from the Constitutional Court. Prosecutors in Taiwan have indicted 23 people for allegedly spying for China. They include 8 active members of the military, with the highest ranked officer being an Army captain. The military personnel involved were from the Armed Forces and Coast Guard and allegedly spied on Taiwan's military bases. Prosecutors say the spy ring's leader were recruited by 2 Chinese businessmen in 2021 to collect information on Taiwan's military. The chief suspects are now held incommunicado. September 21st is National Disaster Prevention Day in Taiwan, the anniversary of one of the deadliest catastrophes in living memory to hit the country, the 1999 GG or 921 earthquake. Reporters Reese Air went to Chiayi in the south to attend an event demonstrating Taiwan's disaster preparedness.
Earthquake, typhoon, military invasion. Whatever the threat, Taiwan is ready. That's the message coming out of this demonstration in Chiayi in Taiwan's south for National Disaster Prevention Day. The annual event takes place on or around the anniversary of the devastating GG or 921 earthquake that killed over 2,400 people in 1999. In addition to remembering past tragedies, the day has become a chance to educate the public on how to respond in the face of disaster. After touring exhibits, President Liao expressed his gratitude to the personnel at the forefront of emergency rescue efforts.
各位都是国内救灾第一线最强大的力量。
Bringing together humanitarian groups, emergency workers, defense experts and tech specialists from Taiwan and abroad, the exhibitions showcase the latest in disaster response training and technology.
主要它可以搭载炮塔，也就是可以直接做涉水的消防涉水。
The event considers disaster response from a range of angles, from food prep to medical equipment to rescue animals.
是那个赈灾救援专用的狗，就瓦砾，所以说它在有地震瓦砾的时候，我们会派我们的狗去做第一个搜索。
Emergency workers like Michael Chen share their experiences dealing with disaster. Most recently after the deadly 7.2 magnitude earthquake that shook Taiwan in April this year.
We respond earthquake. There's a building in New Taipei City collapsed, so we go to the spawn space to rescue the patient inside.
Enoch Wu, a former Special Forces soldier turned politician, was there too with his organization Forward Alliance, a civil defense think tank based in Taipei.
You know, we've trained approximately 20,000 civilians in the past few years in emergency response. And what we're here to showcase is that civil society, is that the general public stands ready to help in case of emergency.
Civil society has increasingly been taking an active role in Taiwan's disaster response. Joshua Brandon from Spirit of America, an NGO supporting American values and allies the world over, encourages citizens to consider how they can prepare.
I think it starts at home. I think it just starts understanding, resources in your community that you can take advantage of in a crisis. It's also understanding your neighbors. I think the simplest thing you can do is just know your neighbors and know what their needs might be in a crisis. I think it starts there.
In Taiwan, the potential for a natural or man-made disaster is always in the back of the nation's psyche. And while sobering, events like these show the country's dedication at giving people the best chance at overcoming the worst-case scenario. Joseph Wu and Reese Ayres in Chiayi for TaiwanPlus.
As Reese mentioned, September 21st, 1999 is a day that lives long in the memory of Taiwanese people. And while the country looks forward in the hopes of preventing the next big disaster, it's left with many reminders. Cadence Quaranta reports.
Earthquake drills like this one are common in Taiwan. But on this day, they hold a special significance. They honor National Disaster Prevention Day and mark a grim anniversary.
现在地震间歇，请大家不要慌张，拿书包或书本保护头部。
之前大地震的时候，要是之前没有做过这些训练的话，也是没有这样子的一个冷静的效果。然后可能平常灾害的时候也会比较好应付一点。
25 years ago, thousands of people were killed by a 7.3 magnitude earthquake in central Taiwan. It destroyed over 50,000 homes, damaged over 800 schools, and left communities without power for weeks. The quake's epicenter was a small town in Nantou County, and most seriously affected Nantou and neighboring Taichung. Over 2 decades later, memories of the earthquake remain clear to those who survived it. Dr. Hong Hongjang was on shift in Nantou Hospital when the earthquake struck at nearly 2 a.m., not far from the epicenter. He still remembers the chaos and how quickly they had to make decisions about who to treat.
所以基本上，那时候我们检伤方面不是分1、2、3事情，没有，只分活跟死2个而已。那时候已经忘记劳累了，但是环境就是抢救，然后再抢救。
With over 2,000 people dead and more than 10,000 injured, there was a shortage of critical supplies. Emergency workers also had to call for more coffins and body freezers. Water risked running out, so the head of the Nantou Fire Department remembers that when a winery caught fire, he decided to let it burn. In the end, he said, that decision served a dual purpose.
所有的街道都停电，电力公司全部停电，一片黑漆漆，刚好有这个光。它那个光很大，那个火灾的光，而且它在半山腰，那个光很大，所以它照亮了南投市、中寮乡，还有草屯镇，所以这个区域人心稍微安定。
In a neighboring county, some of the destruction from that time is still preserved today.
Here in Taichung, this used to be a school, but it was seriously damaged in the earthquake. The fault line that caused the quake runs directly through this school, and all around me are damaged buildings. Since then, it's been turned into a museum where people can learn and remember, but it's also a reminder that people need to be prepared for future disasters.
And in many ways, Taiwan is preparing. It's changed building regulations to protect against earthquakes and is upgrading an early warning system. But none of this can wipe away emotional scars. Lin Huiqi, who was a teenager at the time, is now a teacher at a school damaged in the 1999 quake. She said she's still afraid of the dark because of it.
当下1点多也是整个是黑暗的，我又看不到，我只能躺在床上摇，然后我听到旁边东西都掉，我又不敢就是起来乱走，所以就只能等爸爸拿着手电筒来带我出去。就之后只要一停电，我可能会比较焦虑。 比较害怕这样子。
Like her, many across Taiwan have their own stories of the earthquake. As the country moves forward in hopes of preventing another disaster, many continue to bear the weight of these memories 25 years later. Ryan Wu, Pichi Zhuang, and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
A new documentary about the historic 9/21 earthquake follows a Canadian photojournalist who took award-winning photos of the disaster. The makers of the new film tracked down the subjects of those photos more than 2 decades later. Chris Gorin reports.
My editor called me from the paper and told me about a hotel building they heard collapsed in the Songshan area. And they were rescuing people in and out. And I noticed there was one lady and the firefighter, he put his coat over her to keep her warm and maybe to be more modest because she had like night clothes on, I think. And I pressed the button right then.
A new documentary on the devastating 7.3 magnitude earthquake that struck Taiwan on September 21st, 1999 has been released for the 25th anniversary of the disaster.
A special screening of the film was hosted by the Canadian Trade Office in Taipei. It follows the experience of Canadian photojournalist David Smith, who captured some of the most enduring photos of the earthquake and its aftermath.
The quake, referred to as the 9/21 or Gigi quake, killed close to 2,500 people and destroyed 50,000 homes. Smith says his commemoration project holds special significance for him.
It's been on my mind. That's the biggest news event I've ever covered was the 9/21. And it affected me a lot, just covering it emotionally. It might be kind of cool to try and find people in the pictures.
And I thought that was crazy. That was definitely Mission Impossible. I look at the photos, there was an earthquake baby, there's a rescue worker, there's a firefighter. No, it's not possible to find people from the photos that someone took 25 years ago. It's not possible. I mean, people change. I think the reason that I really wanted to make it happen was, unlike typhoons, earthquakes are not predictable. It could happen just 1 minute. It could happen now.
One of the people in Smith's photos, a newborn baby, delivered just days before the quake in a remote indigenous community, was particularly difficult to track down. Director Roger Zheng remembers the moment he realized he had found her.
I just got goosebumps. When the village chief said, "No, I know this mother. She's Miss Huang." I was like, "Really?" "Yeah." I will send you her line message between him, myself, and the mom. And I sent out a photo and say, "Yeah, that's me and my daughter."
The filmmakers were able to track down all three of the people from the photos. While Smith says the experience of photographing 9/21 was pivotal for his career, even leading to international photography awards, he says it took an emotional toll.
Doing the earthquake stuff, you feel like a ghoul. I mean, when I was at Taichung, they had containers that were refrigerated, and it was just stacked full of bodies. You know, little kids' pictures, decorating them with toys and stuff, and then incense. And it's just like, you can't look into people's eyes without seeing the hurt. And unless you're soulless, you're going to feel something.
But the filmmakers say they were glad to be able to document a key moment in Taiwan's history, and that lessons were learned from the tragedy.
I'm really happy about it. And hopefully it's a piece of Taiwan history and people will remember it. And I'm kind of proud to do that, to be part of like Taiwan history, you know, or to record part of it, I mean.
Revisiting 9/21, now available to view on TaiwanPlus, comes almost 6 months after another major earthquake in April. It offers a reminder of how far the nation has come since that defining tragedy 25 years ago. Kamashu, Pichi Zhuang, and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Turning to a bit of finance news now, Taiwan's central bank wants to fight soaring housing prices with new rules on mortgages. The bank says the regulations will reduce the number of high-risk loans while also removing grace periods for first-time mortgage applications. Central bank authorities see high-risk home loans as a major risk factor for a housing bubble. The bank also decided to keep Taiwan's interest rates unchanged following the U.S. Federal Reserve's first cut in 4 years. It says fighting inflation is no longer a priority. We're going to hop to a quick break, but stick with us because coming up, Israel carries out fresh strikes on Hezbollah just days after a series of explosions rocked Lebanon.
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Israeli warplanes have carried out their most intense strikes against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon in nearly a year. It comes as tensions escalate after 2 deadly attacks on Hezbollah. Rosie Greninger reports.
Israel launches airstrikes on Hezbollah infrastructure in Lebanon as tensions between them reach a boiling point. The bombardment lasted nearly 2 hours, targeting hundreds of the militant group's rocket launchers in southern Lebanon, weapons they're known to have used against Israel.
זהו שלב חדש במלחמה, יש בו הזדמנויות, אך יש בו גם סיכונים כבדי משקל. חיזבאללה נמצא בתחושה של נרדפות, ורצף הפעולות הצבאיות והביטחוניות שלנו יימשך.
The strike came as funerals were being held for some of the dozens of people killed in a wave of attacks that Hezbollah blames on Israel. Hundreds of pagers and walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah militants exploded simultaneously 2 days in a row, injuring thousands, including bystanders. Israel has not commented on those attacks. In a televised address, Hezbollah's Lebanon chief called it a declaration of war and vowed retaliation, saying the rigged devices crossed all red lines. As the speech aired, Israeli jets could be heard flying through the Lebanese capital, Beirut.
لا شك أن العدوان الذي حصل هو عدوان كبير وكما قلت في سياق الكلمة هو غير مسبوق وسيواجه بحساب عسير وقصاص عادل من حيث يحتسبون ومن حيث لا يحتسبون.
Nasrallah also said Hezbollah is undeterred in its fight against Israel in support of the embattled Palestinians in Gaza. The militant group has been exchanging daily fire with Israel since the outbreak of war in Gaza on October 7th. But this latest aggravation has heightened fears it could escalate into an all-out regional conflict. It's prompted world leaders to call for restraint and diplomatic solutions.
We are concerned about the tension and afraid and concerned about potential escalation. We have said that in the Middle East. We've been very clear. And we've also said that the way to move forward is diplomatic resolution.
The White House added it believes securing a Gaza ceasefire deal is the way forward to reduce tensions. But as strikes continue between Israel and Hezbollah, that goal seems far away, as both sides gear up to continue retaliations. James Lin and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
The Economy Ministry has told TaiwanPlus that Gold Apollo, the Taiwanese company whose brand of pagers exploded in Lebanon earlier this week, has no history of direct exports to Lebanon. The ministry says Gold Apollo has exported 260,000 pagers, but that it cannot confirm the exact models. Officials say there is no record of explosions with any of the company's previous exports. Police are investigating whether the pagers in Lebanon were modified with explosives after export or during manufacturing by a third party. A Vietnamese billionaire already on death row for major bank fraud is back on trial for new charges. This time, prosecutors are charging Trung My Lan with fraud, money laundering, and making illegal cross-border payments. Vietnamese police say the laundered $18 billion and raised more than $1 billion from investors through illegal bonds. Lan's case is the latest in Vietnam's recent anti-corruption drive, which also led the country's president to resign earlier this year. Two new programs aimed at attracting global talent to Taiwan could soon be in the works. One will give a so-called elite card to people who earn about $190,000 a year. Cardholders can apply for permanent residency after just 1 year in Taiwan. There is also a plan to launch a 3-month digital nomad visa. It will be extendable for an extra 3 months, after which visa holders can apply for an employment gold card. The aim is to address a growing worker shortage caused by an aging population, while also competing with other countries for international workers with high-demand skills. For more on the new immigration proposals for high earners and digital nomads, John Van Trieste spoke with David Chang of Crossroads, at an NGO that works to bridge the Taiwanese and international communities.
As an organization that promotes a more international and diverse Taiwan, what are your first impressions of the government's latest plans or proposals to bring in more high earners and digital nomads?
I'm not so certain at this stage that just simply offering shortened pathways to a permanent residence is going to exactly be an attractive benefit, especially when people can get the same benefits of just getting a gold card. And, with already a shortened path towards getting the permanent residency with just 3 years.
Are these higher earners and digital nomads and the sorts of jobs that they do necessarily the ones that Taiwan needs? Because one rationale that's been put forward in some reports about this is that it's meant to fill in sort of the gaps in the job market left by a shrinking population.
It's just a question of how they can use them in these positions and whether they can also afford them. And whether there's actually enticement for people to work in these companies, especially when there's work culture and language culture issues, management issues that still remain. So there's still questions about how best these folks can actually fit in. Another question is whether industry is actively looking for these types of talents. One of the biggest questions that still remain, though, is whether Taiwan's local industries are actually actively looking for such high-level talents.
So one of the goals, of course, of this elite card program is to get these professionals to stay in Taiwan. That's why they're offering them residency after just a year. But what would encourage them to put down roots here?
They might want to become entrepreneurs. How easy is it to start a business? What are the market opportunities here? And ultimately, if they're going to stay long term, perhaps what are the benefits and also services and resources that they can tap into if they are thinking of settling down roots here, having families here, and ultimately whether their children, if they're going to have children, to whether they also will become citizens in Taiwan and become integrated fully into the society. And these are all part of the calculus of people coming to Taiwan and whether they will eventually stay and not only just become workers themselves and contributors to the economy.
That was David Chang of the NGO Crossroads speaking with our reporter John Van Trieste. Baseball superstar Shohei Otani has made history by hitting 50 home runs and stealing 50 bases in a single season. Otani is the first ever major league player to achieve such a feat, and he did it while still recovering from elbow surgery. The Japanese-born player reached the milestone during an incredible performance in Miami on Thursday. His team, the Los Angeles Dodgers, beat the home team Marlins 20-4. Otani made 6 hits in 6 at-bats. He knocked in 10 runs, hit 3 homers, and stole 2 bases. Otani also set a Dodger record, becoming the player to hit the most home runs for the team in a single season. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, check out some highlights from the Milan Fashion Week. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.